Hello. My name is Yasmin Green, Director of Research and Development at Jigsaw, which is a technology incubator inside of Alphabet. And I'm here to talk to you today about fake news. This keynote is fake news. It's for you to decide. My assumption coming into it is that fake news is something that affects us all. But I want to check that. So, by show of hands, how many of you here have read an article that you think was fake news? Now some people have two hands up. How many people here have seen a post or a comment online that you think was posted by somebody who wasn't who they were claiming to be? OK. And how many people think that the challenge of fake news and fake personas is worse now than it was a decade ago? OK, excellent. I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. When I started my career in tech over a decade ago, things looked really different. So Google didn't own YouTube or Sites or Blogger or Android. But today, people are their own publishing platforms and TV stations. Back then, search was your window to the web. If it didn't rank high on the search page results, you probably wouldn't find out about it. Fast forward a decade, and most of us get a lot of our news from social networks. And there's been this explosion in connectivity, which is amazing. It's brought people online from different parts of the world. And the next billion people who are coming online look really different from the first billion. The next billion are not coming online in Silicon Valley or central London or even Austin, Texas. They're coming online in parts of the world where rule of law is weak, human rights aren't protected, and they are living a physical reality which they will bring with them online. So our job at Jigsaw is to design technology to make the world safer, and to think a lot about the next billion people who are coming online. We want to keep people safer from attacks on free speech, from attacks on harassment, from attacks like violent extremism, and injustice and corruption. So very big challenges that we think that technology can tackle. And our product development process is really simple. It starts with a field trip. We don't think that you can design meaningful technology without speaking to the people who are in danger. So our researchers and engineers go to the field and speak predominantly to activists and journalists and dissidents to find out about the threats they face. So to give you a few examples, last year we went together to Iraq to speak to defectors from the Islamic State. Young men who had left home, fled to the caliphate, trained as suicide bombers, and then defected. It's a really credible group of people to tell you why they decided that ISIS was a good thing, and what information would have changed their minds in making the decision to go, which was a decision they regretted. And out of that research, we designed the redirect method, which is a new approach to tackling extremism based on targeted advertising and curated YouTube videos. Similarly, we spoke to election monitors and activists in Kenya who told us about attacks on democracy there, a type of attack called a distributed denial of service attack, which was designed to take websites offline during the election. So we took that insight and we built Project Shield, which is a DDoS, a distributed denial of service mitigation service, which is free for news and election monitors around the world. And everywhere we go, activists, dissidents, politicians, journalists, we hear about online intimidation, a problem which is getting better organized, better funded, and state-sponsored. So just last month, we released Perspective, which is a tool that uses machine learning to spot examples of harassment and intimidation around the web. So we always start with a field trip. And today, we are going to go on a field trip together. But you are not going to have to leave your seats. You are going to meet people who are going to lend unique and complementary perspectives into the changing landscape of our information democracy. They're going to help us understand disinformation and what we can do about it. So these are people who have been accused of many things, among them falsifying facts, fabricating stories, and peddling conspiracies. But I think we're going to learn a thing or two about the human dynamics behind the problem that we all take seriously, the problem of disinformation. So please, I'm really excited to welcome them on stage. Please give them a warm welcome, and let's get this field trip started. Welcome Justin Kohler, who's the former fake news publisher, and Jeffrey Marty, who's a defense attorney and fake persona. Welcome, Jeffrey and Justin. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely.
You say hello.
Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to just get a few things clear before we kick off the conversation. Firstly, my own position on this is that access to information is a fundamental human right. And the internet enables people all around the world to access information that makes their lives better. And that deceitful content really does undermine the promise of the internet. Having said that, hoaxes, satire, politics, even information warfare have been around since the beginning of different media, TV, radio, and print. So the motives there are not new. What is new are the means. And that's where I'd like to focus the conversation today, is around the mechanics, as they are now and as they will be in the future. And there's a chance that I think some of the examples that we talk about are going to be of a political nature. I do not want to have a political conversation today, so my job as a moderator is to steer us away from too much politics, rabbit holes, ad hominem attacks, and keep us focused on what's new, and more importantly, what we all can do about it. So with that, I'll kick off, Justin, with you. You have been described as a mogul of the fake news business. I'm really curious to hear from you, given that all self-proclaimed news outlets are some blend of fact and bias and entertainment. I'm curious to hear from you how you would define fake news.
Good question. I do think it's been muddied a lot over the past few months here. Traditionally, fake news is defined as news that is specifically made up. It's fictional in nature. None of it is true. It's not factual. So now it's kind of been dwarfed into this, calling something fake news simply because it's not something that you believe in. So the meaning has shifted quite a bit. Now it's kind of a blanket term to describe things that you just don't believe in. Before it was very specifically just fictional content. Right.
You've described fake news to me as it's a fake name, fake town, fake
everything
incident.
about it is
fake.
fake.
Consistently, thoroughly.
Totally fiction.
Absolutely fake.
Absolutely fake.
OK. And you actually, you're most well known for a newspaper called the Denver Guardian, which is not a real newspaper. We'll get to that.
Correct.
But most of your fake news career was actually devoted to a different outlet, which was called the National Report.
Correct.
So maybe we could start there. If you could just explain to us what the National Report was.
Well, it has evolved over time as well. But when we first started, first of all, my background is in political science and communications. And so I've always been interested in politics and kind of virality, I guess. So I had noticed the rise in what is now considered the alt-right media in 2013. 2012 is actually when I was really paying attention to it. 2013, I launched my own site to kind of see how easy it would be to kind of infiltrate these groups and have other people reprint things that I knew to be fiction. So set out from there, started the site, started with a single contributor and myself, built the site, and just kind of started to see what we could do to get things, what kind of things people would believe, what kind of things people wouldn't believe, and just kind of started from there.
So what was your first article?
Oh, the headline was something along the lines of marijuana kills, and it was about a person who died from marijuana, but it had nothing to do with the smoking of the marijuana. It was something fell on him or something of that nature. It was, it was totally just a bait and switch deal. So yeah, that was the first story that we actually ran on the site. So kind of back to the story, I guess. Several people wanted to be part of this as we started to get more traffic and get more attention. So contributors started coming to us and wanting to contribute. So the first year of the site, it was really just about having fun, kind of pranks and hoaxes. It wasn't what's considered now to be fake news. It was really just kind of a few friends kind of screwing around online. As things grew, then advertisers came to us and wanted to partner with us. So it did end up being more of a financial incentive. But that's kind of the story of National Report. So I'm sure we'll get into it later. But in January of 2015, Facebook had made changes to their algorithm to target my site and sites like mine. We saw a drastic drop in our traffic. And at that time, I'd kind of become very friendly with the contributors. We're like family. So I always had thought of them as being very clever people and good writers. And so we kind of made the shift to be more traditionally satirical at that point. Things that were more clever, slapstick, funny, silly, whatever it was. Sometimes offensive, sorry. So I largely avoided kind of this fake news stuff from that point on until the Denver Guardian story.
Okay. Well, before we move on to the Denver Guardian, give us a few more examples of what did really well on the National Report. What was your most popular article?
Well, we had several that did really well. Things that we kind of always went back into the bag for were kind of some genuine conspiracy theory stuff, RFID chips and Obamacare mandates and things of that nature.
What's the RFID conspiracy? I'm not familiar with it.
Well, this was just about Obamacare. We ran several stories about RFID chips, but the ones that did well were an Obamacare mandate that you received an RFID chip as part of the Obamacare. So that did really well for some reason. And outside of that, several of the things that we did, again, were just more hoaxes. They weren't necessarily political in nature. They were kind of poking fun at some people and whatever. We ran a really big story about the graffiti artist Banksy being arrested and revealed his identity was somebody that was on our staff. And that one did very well. We did a series of stories that was our interpretation of kind of a modern day War of the Worlds around the Ebola outbreak. It was not well received by any means. I don't think people got it.
So what was the headline?
We kind of created a town that had been quarantined based on an outbreak of Ebola. And our news team, of course, was the only one that was able to get in before the media gag order. And so we had a live reporter on the ground in this town, tweeting out pictures of like deserted streets, and so that one did very well also.
So okay, and give us a feel for what very well means.
Well, generally, when we would look at how well a story performed, we would look at just the metrics, the analytics of page views. The Banksy story got maybe 6 to 7 million page views.
Right. Yeah, that's impressive. This audience thinks
bad.
that's impressive. Okay. And one other question I wanted to ask you was about the offline impact. So there's an example that's actually marijuana related of you writing an article that was fake.
Sure.
That was taken seriously.
Sure.
And resulted in.
Right. I wrote a story that a marijuana shop in Colorado. I built my own online dispensary site, first of all, to kind of give it this backing, right? And so when you go to the dispensary website, it says big splash across the screen. Oh yeah, there it is. We accept EBT. So that actually
EBT stands for.
They accept food stamps for marijuana.
Okay.
And that was again kind of along this narrative of, you know, generally people get upset about what other people use their food stamps on for some reason.
Right.
You know, oh my God, he was buying steaks or he was buying soda with his food stamps. Who cares? So anyway, wrote this story about the pot shop taking food stamps, and a state representative in Colorado ran with this and introduced legislation to prevent people from buying marijuana with food stamps in Colorado.
Were you guys high-fiving? And like, how do you, when you see that, are
It's
you
fun.
shocked or you just
Sure,
get
it's fun. You know, we have a tight-knit group, and we kind of, you know, that was funny.
All right, so it wasn't a one-man show.
Oh no, of course
the
not.
National Report?
No, there were several people. At the height of, in 2014 was really when we were putting out the most content, and there were about roughly 20 contributors.
Okay, and you describe their role not just in terms of putting out articles, but also that they were helpful in kind of community engagement.
Oh yeah, we would all help each other. So when you put a story out, you know, if I were to put out a story, they would all help me in spreading it, first of all, kind of spamming it around, but then also joining in on the conversation to kind of give it more credibility. So, you know, jumping into the comment section and showing fake outrage or whatever it was. You know, I saw this on my local news channel or whatever, even though it was not. So, you know, just kind of helping to keep whatever the hoax was or the joke was going.
Right, right. Or even somebody saying, like, I just passed by that, you know, like, the South by Southwest keynote like is in flames, and it's
right.
like I just
yeah,
it's
just
in
go by
flames.
there.
Oh my
There's
God,
fire
the
trucks
fire
everywhere.
trucks.
Yeah,
Right,
sure,
okay.
sure.
I get it.
So yeah, it's again, it's a group of guys and gals that, you know, we just are kind of goofing around.
And your hypothesis is that there were people who were not insiders in terms of being on your staff, but they were insiders in that they understood
Absolutely.
that that's not real.
Sure.
But and
well, once they're kind of, you know, I think people enjoy thinking or knowing that they're in on something that other people aren't. So sure, they would jump right in as well, similar to what our contributors would do, you know, just to kind of keep the story going.
So there'd be someone that you didn't know at all who'd be like, yeah, I just saw the flames and the fire
Absolutely.
trucks. It's like there are 8 of them.
Sure,
And
sure.
you're like, cool. All right. Okay, we'll hear a bit more from you, Justin, in
Sure.
a little bit. Jeffrey, if I can bring you into the conversation. In our time together, I've come to learn quite a bit about you. That at your core, you are a family man. That as a lawyer, you are obsessed with facts. You enjoy arguing your case, which I'm sure we'll see a little bit of today. And you're a self-described Trump supporter, though not an unconditional one. And you are also a politician. A popular politician. Jeffrey represents the 15th Congressional District of Georgia, which is really impressive because Georgia only has 14 congressional districts.
It's a miracle, really. So
maybe you can tell us a little bit about Representative Stephen Smith.
Okay, some of you may have heard of my account or not. I've run the Representative Stephen Smith account from Georgia since of October of 2013. It kind of started in a little bit of tragedy. One of my best friends, really my best friend, committed suicide in in September of about 1 month before that. And we used to do pranks all the time together. I mean, like fake, you know, accounts on social media sites and things like that, where we pretend to be like 1%er bikers or pretend to be, you know, like all sorts of different personas, like strange, just weird people, prank calls, that kind of stuff. So I don't really know why I started this. Like, I mean, people ask me like, what's your inspiration and all of this. I know it was partially that because there's a lot of like depression and upset, and like it was just kind of like a way of lashing out. And then on the other side of it, really, I guess from my own point of view, I've been in the Republican Party for probably 10, 15 years, something like that. I only really was in it because I always thought the Republican Party had more potential than the Democratic Party as far as actual reform. I went to a very liberal university, the University of Wisconsin at Madison. I went to law school at Marquette University, which is Catholic, but it's still, a fairly liberal university. It's Jesuit. And in both of those, I majored in political science. So I've always had an interest in politics, but just not a lot of desire to really actually participate in an actual real way. So one of the things that have been bothering me for a number of years was that it seemed like the establishment of our party had been completely hijacked by memes, or not memes I shouldn't say, but like narratives, social media narratives, like the one
social justice.
Social justice. Yeah, sure. Like what you said with the I mean, that cover with Ted Cruz and Sarah Palin, I mean, with the EBT benefits. I mean, people are going to believe that possibly just because they're so, I mean, we're told that EBT benefits are so wrong by some parts of the party, and then, the establishment doesn't really speak for a lot of people in the Republican Party really, really, really dislike the establishment. I've run polls as Rep. Smith, like, what is your opinion of Paul Ryan? And they run usually around 93% or so plus negative, or they'll say, I'll give like 3 choices, like he's okay, it could be better, and then like the third will be he's a traitor. The 93% one will be the traitor one. So there's a lot of dissension right now in the Republican Party in general. So what I geared the account toward first was things about like making my guy just the prototype or like the quintessential establishment, never talks about anything serious that he does, never accomplishes a single thing. His biggest accomplishment was the Carnival Safety Act of 2011, which was referenced like nonstop for like saving countless lives on Ferris wheels and like improving the quality of fryer grease and all of this. And my friend, I made a friend on there. He's my chief of staff. He goes by TJ Mitch Johnson, and he's really helped me keep that going. I mean, he's kind of baited a lot of journalists and kind of gets into arguments with people. And then I have to get in and sort of calm him down. Like when we argued with William Shatner. He had put something up that William Shatner didn't like very much, with Hillary Clinton's face pressed against the window of the plane from that Twilight Zone. But it was Hillary Clinton and not the monster. And then William Shatner was not pleased by this, so he writes something. And then I wrote, "Don't worry, sir, I'm going to beam him up for discipline on Monday." And she really didn't like, because then he found out we were fake, and he got really angry and tried to get us suspended. And it didn't work. And at that point, I knew Twitter was kind of like they had sort of accepted us, I think. But really, I mean, I like
Jeffrey, let me just start with a burning question on my mind. Who is that person depicted in your Twitter profile?
Stock photo? Or?
Oh, it was a stock photo, and I bought a series of them so that I would have different poses. That one, if you notice the one on there, like you notice the laptop has like all these really old ports that no one uses anymore. So like people will be like, nice 90s laptop, dude. When are you gonna get like an updated picture of yourself? And then there's other ones where he looks very serious, and I've got a couple that I haven't even used yet where he looks like he's like furious. I might put those up someday as like to promote something. But
okay, so you're looking through stock photos and you're like, this is my guy, this is this.
I thought he looked kind of perfect in that. And
okay.
the one I used initially, like the most, I thought that one looked perfect because it was him like just kind of turned sideways, like with some leaves behind him. And, then I think it's almost always been the American flag in the background waving. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then as far as the description, it's all the things that I've changed it somewhat, so the one you're seeing now isn't quite exactly the same, but at first I called myself a Tea Party patriot, which was something that was just, like rage-inducing at the time, because people that really didn't like the Tea Party, that was kind of I really actually didn't even understand the Tea Party at the time. I wasn't really a member of it, if there was a thing. I'm sure I agreed with some of the people that did some of the things in it. I was kind of hopeful actually for Obama in 2008, if you can believe that. But it's just, over McCain, because I thought McCain was the old establishment type candidate, and like maybe Obama would be better. But as we go up and down in this, like the Trump phenomenon is, I guess, kind of how I became a little more famous, as they might call it, for this account. Initially, it was mostly things like how clean my sex life is, how I had never seen pornography, how everyone else should live, like according to my, like all these different moral issues that I would take on the industries, like these different industries, like the pot industry was one. I had a hashtag called pot kills and linked to articles. Probably, if the timing was right, we might have even linked to yours. I don't know, it's possible. Sure. But it was, But so there's a lot of that stuff, and making fun of the establishment, and making fun of it when they were doing nothing, and just putting up a bunch of platitudes, never accomplishing anything. And then when Trump came along, the party really, a lot of people don't understand this that are more on the Democratic side. The Republican Party has been sort of at war with itself for a long time. Like the Libertarian wing, the Ron Paul people, the Perot types, like all of that area of the party has been in a lot of conflict with the people more like Ted Cruz, but especially people like Mitch McConnell that are considered completely establishment. They run things because they have donors. They're not well liked by, at least my polls suggest 90% plus of people. So it's like you wonder how they got these jobs, and it's just, and who really controls these parties. And I always thought that, I didn't always think this, I guess. I was a Democrat for a long time, but I thought the Republican Party had more potential. Where Trump comes along, and here this guy is during the Republican Party primary debates, saying the most outrageous things that you've ever heard. If you're talking about unorthodox opinions, saying that Jeb Bush's brother is a liar, he got us into the Iraq War, and he knew he was lying. Imagine that. Someone can get elected in a primary after saying something. That's like blasphemy. You can't say these things. So I supported Trump mostly just because I thought he was that kind of guy. Not because I thought he was going to save the world, or that he was I loved his personal life, and he's a great guy, and his marital life is so wonderful, or something. It was nothing like that. It was only because I thought he was the one guy that could actually say what he meant, and maybe actually do it, and maybe force all these other guys that I was just talking to you about, that the rest of that get the bad poll results from my polls, maybe kind of push them in the direction where they have to do something that matters. Plus, he's very much a centrist on some things, kind of anti-war. One of the debates, he said, "No one's going to die in the street when I'm president," as in reference to healthcare. And Cruz and Rubio are sneering at him, and all this. It's just the party was completely lost at that point, and he came along and he seemed more attractive. So I've been a Trump supporter, and I tried to help him. I endorsed him.
Okay, so let's maybe talk about that. You started off the Twitter account as something of a prankster, and
yes,
you gradually became more serious, still fake, but more serious kind of politician in some respects. And you told me that was partly because you realized that it could be used as a platform for exposing what you perceive to be bias in the liberal media, especially in the run-up to the election where you thought that was important.
That was big. There were times earlier, every time Trump would make a comment, and he always was making a comment. Every week was something. It was Trump's comments. It didn't matter what it was. Something that outraged enough people, and then all the Republicans would gather around and see how terrible this was. Whatever, all the ones that, the Paul Ryans and the rest of them. And I would fight back at those, and people loved that. And my following grew quite a bit during that time. There's the liberal media, as far as the coverage. One of the things that really bothered me during it, it's kind of what you'd expect. There's going to be more spin for Hillary than there was for Trump. They're not going to like Trump that much. Our media, the National Review, they wrote a whole issue about how terrible Trump is. To give you an idea of the conservative wing of the party, they never liked Trump either. They were very opposed to Trump. And I wonder sometimes if that's not because of the donor base, the power base. Everybody's got their little position in the system, and they're all losing them, or risking losing them, if they have a guy who really is a centrist, actually get into power and actually do things. It could be that, it could be other things, but...
So your account was, in a way, to challenge the bias on both sides, and you were, were you a real politician, you would have been one of the first to come out and support.
I was his first endorsement.
Okay, right.
But it was, and it got 7,000 retweets. People were pretty happy about that. But it was...
When you came out in support of, you came off the fence and you said, I put my weight.
Said, after careful consideration, I have decided to endorse Donald Trump. And this was right before the Iowa primary, when people were still pretty distant from him and trying to avoid him. And I don't know how much it helped him or didn't, but it was, that was part of it. But the fight really for me, it was, I am not a cultish believer in any type of politician. I think they all have a lot of flaws, and I think that they all have their own biases. And I certainly am not for Trump in that way. I just was more, I think, offended by the way that other people were acting toward him. That as if though his comment is worse than her action. Or just the disproportionate responses. And it seemed like everybody was against him from the establishment, which seemed to me that he must be doing something right. Now,
Okay.
maybe that's
and
not
also
right.
your follower base, when you were challenging some of the media coverage, you were getting a lot of support from
Oh,
Twitter.
I mean, certainly. That was, and one of the things that I think you were referring to was that we were, you know, when I would challenge the media and I would fight with the reporters, lots of reporters, and we would, you know, we'd go back and forth arguing, and you know, like especially like the New York Times we had a lot of issues, became sort of personal, and then they did some things they shouldn't have done. But I'm gonna not talk about that here. But it's, you know, I was the first Bernie bro. If anybody here remembers the Bernie bros, they said there's this like sexist roving gang of college men who all love Bernie and hate Hillary, and they're all, you know, just based on sexist reasons. It was one of my comments and my chief of staff, Mitch's, interactions that led to one of the New Yorker writers saying that this Bernie bro called me a psycho. I called her a psycho in the comment to him, saying like, don't deal with the psychos. And so she puts that out there. Then the Bernie Bros thing became a narrative, and then people started talking about, who are these Bernie Bros? Who are the Bernie Bros? And then somehow, like Bernie Sanders is apologizing on TV like a week or two later and telling him to cut the crap. You know, these Bernie Bros, whoever they are. Well, they're me, and I don't support Bernie, and like it's totally clear from there that I don't. And it was, you know, so I don't really. I mean, that one was fake. If you want to call something fake news, that was like very, very, very serious fake news.
Okay, good. That's a good segue back to Justin. Justin, a lot of the content that came out on the National Report had the pro-Trump or maybe anti-Clinton bias. Is that fair? The stuff that was political in nature.
Sure.
Was it also your goal to try to swing the election?
Not one bit.
No?
No. Wasn't at all political.
It wasn't?
No.
Okay, because it's interesting. If I were to look at your content, I might assume that you have a different politics to you do. I mean,
well, similar to what Jeffrey does with his character, National Report is kind of a character as well. You know, it's kind of a parody of the right-wing media. So no, we certainly didn't intend to influence the election in any fashion. It's, you know, I think you're referring now to the Denver Guardian.
Oh yeah, okay. So let's talk about the Denver Guardian. It was a site that you built in one day and had a shelf life of just 4 days.
Correct.
But is one of the most notorious websites when we speak about fake news, especially around the election.
Right.
So tell us why you built the Denver Guardian.
Well, in the run-up to the election, several former contributors from my site who are also in this industry still, they kind of branched off into their own stuff. I saw them doing really big viral stories. And I had been thinking of this idea for the Denver Guardian for about 1.5 years before I pulled the trigger on it. And so I see all my friends doing really big viral stories. To be honest, my mortgage was due. I was told that by every person in the media that Hillary had it in the bag. Right. And so I spent an afternoon, I put the site together, wrote the story that took off.
And for those of us who didn't read it, what was the headline from that story?
The headline was something along the lines of an FBI agent who was investigating Hillary found dead in an apparent murder-suicide.
And how many times was that shared on social media?
Shared, I think, was around 500,000 times. Total page views was about 1.6 million.
Okay, 3 days before the election.
Yes.
Okay. And you've spoken before about the financial reward. You said an article could bring in $5,000 to $7,000 and that you personally made 6 figures. But you've also talked to me about another incentive, which is not financial, which is about the hits.
Well, yeah, it certainly turns into something that's very addictive, right? When you write something and you put it out there and you kind of do the groundwork of trying to get it to take out, kind of seeding it around different places online, it gets very addictive to watch your actual real-time analytics dashboard on Google to kind of see how it starts to take off, and you can kind of feel the momentum building, and then at some point you're like, oh, here we go. And then it really takes off, and then as it's coming back down, it's again similar to like an addiction. You kind of want that again. You're like, oh man, now I need to start working on my next idea and try to boost that back up and just kind of keeping it going. I mean, even now, I haven't published a story on National Report, and all the fake news sites are closed. But even now, I'll watch my analytics, and there's nobody. I mean, there's like 50 people on there. I'm like checking it out. It's dead.
Right,
so anyway.
right. Yeah, it was fascinating to me, but it really resonated that it could feel like something like a drug, and putting stories out, getting high, and then as the high is waning. I mean, I hear that's what it's like to take drugs. As the high is waning, and then wanting another hit. Jeffrey, you on the other hand, haven't made a cent from, not to rub it in, but I don't believe that it's been lucrative for you.
I should be paid better than nothing, but it's, I kind of come from the opposite perspective. I think we were covering news during the WikiLeaks, during the Podesta emails releases and the DNC releases, but more for me, my memories of this are more during the Podesta era, when they put out, well, I had a couple things happen. One that was very interesting. One of my friends on Twitter, friend in real life, had found that Hillary's IT server had, she found his username, and he had just taken the fifth in front of Congress like very recently before this. And one of the guys who was working for Platte River that ran the server.
Wait, Jeffrey, I've heard this story, and it takes a really long time to tell, and we only have like 18 minutes. Is there like a 30-second version of this story? I think it's important to tell.
Well, I think what I'm getting at is that the non-coverage of this story was important.
Okay.
It was, you can Google it, it's if you like, it's how Reddit ruined the Hillary Clinton campaign. If you want to hear the entire story, it takes a while to talk about. But my point on that one is not that, the Daily Caller published the piece on it. It had a lot of attention from the people that in my little group. I mean, about like this guy was posting about things like about how to falsify the email address. The media basically ignored the story, almost completely. And then with the WikiLeaks releases in general, the Podesta releases were very similarly ignored, where there were very important things that were happening on those days where you get almost nothing on the major media sites. So, I mean, some of us are starting to wonder like how democratic our system really is, because if these stories are this important and they're not even being mentioned, but then we're hearing like false associations between racism and this guy and that guy, or like that, it just made up kind of narrative-driven stuff on the other end. That was really the thing that was troubling for me. I know that's right. I mean, like, that takes a long time, but it's important because
that's right.
with WikiLeaks, it was a crowdsourced effort. It was me. It was guys just like people with like animals for accounts. It was guys working out of their basements and women from all over the place that were just, what we were doing is we were organizing the information around hashtags, taking the emails, clipping them, putting links to them. People were writing articles about it later. But a lot of the stuff that came out was what would be considered very, very important as news. And the shocking part to me was the fact that we were the ones covering it, it seemed like the most. I mean, and that we were the ones spreading it around.
I think that's a really good point to make, and I think there's a real distinction between you and Justin here, is that Justin had, I think there was a kind of intellectual curiosity to you seeing if you could get into the business, but then it became a business. And I think for you, Jeffrey, this was about influence, especially as you realized that you had a platform and this megaphone. But I do actually want to segue now to the mechanics of it. So most of us here would like to probably have a larger presence on social media than we have. And you two have done, from thin air, you've created an audience and credibility. So I wonder if we could spend a little bit of time with you giving us your pro tips. Well, how do you go? You have 30,000 followers.
Well, I'd say
you're not a real person. You represent a district that doesn't exist. I mean, how is it that you got all this traction?
I think part of it is that people, I speak for people that don't like the real Congress. My followers, like I said, I have I run these polls that are about different things, and usually the results they're run toward the establishment mostly, and the media. Like, do you trust this media or that media? Things like that. And so my niche audience are people who really don't like the establishment at all. They want somebody who's going to go.
Politics aside for a second, about who they are. Like,
it was slow growth at first, just because people thought it was funny that I was talking about, all I talk about is like my sex life and like barely any success at all, and brag about it as if though I were like the greatest congressman who's ever walked into the chamber.
Okay, because you had this hashtag that you used to organize your own musings about monogamy?
Like, no, well, that was the clean sex life hashtag.
The clean sex life hashtag.
There was and then we had the pot kills hashtag.
Is she anti-masturbation? I've been trying to get this out of you. Is
yeah.
Mr. Smith anti-masturbation?
Yeah, the new law, yeah. Well, that would be the kind of thing he would be against. It would be he'd be for teach or
he would be in support of anti-masturbation legislation.
Oh yes,
Okay.
Very much so, very much so.
Straighten that out.
But you know, it just kind of grew. It wasn't that big of an account. I mean, you know, we had several thousand followers. I bought some followers at first to make it look real, and then but the real followers grew later. And I think really the only reason I have much of a following is because I talk about the kind of stuff that they wish the real ones talked about.
Okay, but you've spoken to me about what makes a good tweet. So
Okay.
enlighten us.
Okay, what I think makes a good tweet is going to be include multimedia usually if you can, like a photo, a meme, which are really easy to create if you just want to add letters to things. A video, you can download videos and convert them and put them in like directly into your tweets. That's the most effective way of getting people to look at a video tweet. Hashtags, it doesn't necessarily have to be the hashtag. That's actually the one like you can see right there on the, well, actually I don't know if I can, but it's you can use like one of the hashtags I used today was for here for this forum. But then there are other hashtags you can use, like that people are talking about. They're talking about a blizzard or something. Like you can use that and attach political content to it if you want to. I mean, people do that to organize. So a lot of times, what I do first is I go down and I look at the trending hashtags that day, just to see like kind of where to place things, and then I'll post a lot of photos, videos. I think boldness is probably the most important thing. There's nothing more boring to people than writing something like, you know, just. I mean, people have different tweets. I mean, there's inspirational tweets, there's different types of things. Having a very distinct voice that's different than other people and is bold are the things that I think are the most important things. Okay. Because otherwise, why would people have to have a reason to come to your account instead of someone else's account.
Exactly. So Justin, as you were building the Denver Guardian in a day, what were the attributes of that website? You were going for the look and feel of a local news site?
Sure. Just what you would expect to see on a local news site, right? I wrote fake horoscopes, I wrote fake obituaries, I wrote fake local news about your high school sports teams beating a local rival.
But it was a real sports team, or was it fake sports?
All fake, yeah. So, you know, really I just built out the homepage so that it looked like, you know, if someone, generally people don't land on your website by accident, right? They're always following a link. So when they follow a link to your site, if they're concerned that it's not real, if they click to the homepage, then there should be something there that kind of makes, you know, confirms that it's real or makes them think that it's real, right? So, yeah, just built the whole thing out. Again, wrote all the content just in an afternoon about, you know, Sudafed stolen from local Walgreens, you know, some silly local news stuff that you get, and then this story that we ran was kind of buried off of the homepage.
Right.
And you know, your question about the social media stuff, I don't find it very helpful to have a large social media following. You know, I have roughly the same amount of followers than what Jeffrey does. But really, kind of the hashtag stuff is more important to getting attention, or finding the appropriate Facebook group or whatever it is, than having, you know, you spend all this time and all this energy building a large following, and you think, okay, great, when I put something out there, all these people are going to see it. Well, that's not the case. Only a small percentage of those people are going to see it, even when you pay Facebook. Even when you pay Facebook for that exposure, you're still only reaching a fraction of your audience. So even like with the Denver Guardian site, there wasn't even a Facebook page at all. It didn't even exist at all. And you know, we're still able to reach a large number of people by kind of seeding it throughout Facebook groups that were right. Okay. So there's a lot of discussion around this also about, you know, bots and how those spread fake news and all that sort of stuff. I've never heard of anyone doing that, like in the circle of people that I know, and I know several of these publishers like in this space. Really, the bots are actual people. You know, you actually get into a group, and then once you get an emotional response from the reader on the content or the post or whatever it is, then they become your bots, and they're the ones that are spreading your content on your behalf.
I think that the notion of having like this really consistent fictional environment where you have a town and a Walgreens, you have like all these components, but the whole thing is fake. And I think there's a parallel with you, Jeffrey, and you know, so the congressman feels strongly about marijuana. Right? Yeah. Against, you know, part of his platform is that, you know, his manifesto is that he's against marijuana, but you created a son for him
Yes.
online who stands in opposition to him.
Who smokes pot and lives in his dad's basement.
And
he can't stand.
And his
dad's a
Twitter.
fascist.
Yeah, so that's why he wants marijuana possessors to be thrown in prison, so that way his son moves out of the basement. That was a story for a while.
I think it's kind of genius, because who can't relate to kind of being at loggerheads with a family member about some issue or another? And you also have your chief of staff, who...
He's a very smart guy. I mean, like, he's done a lot on this. I mean, I take the credit for it only because in a fit of steroid treatments this summer when I was really, 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 really sick, I decided to out myself after being kind of criticized by somebody who was offended that she had fallen for it and I'd embarrassed her. She said, this older lady. So I outed myself, and then that's when I started having contact with anybody. But he and I were the same in that we were both completely anonymous before this. But he's a very smart guy. And
you don't know him.
No, well, I mean, I know him for years. Like, we text, but we know each other personally.
But I mean, he basically signed up to be your chief of staff.
Yeah, he kind of asked. He was like, is it okay if I just create a chief of staff account? Well, go for it, I don't care. You're hired. But a lot of times it's kind of a 1-2, like where he starts it with somebody, and then I'll jump in and I'll tell him, like the William Shatner thing we did, and like there's been a bunch of other ones, tons, more than I can count. But he'll start the interaction because people are more likely to believe that he's the one doing something outrageous than me. But then I'll jump in and be worse than him, which then inflames the situation way more. Like you were saying earlier, I think it's once you get the people who like your stuff and like even they know it's a parody or whatever, but they still like tweeting it out because they think it's hilarious. Or if you don't tweet for a couple days and they're like, "What's going on? Is everything okay?" Like it's like you start getting a relationship with these people where they kind of depend on you for humor. I mean, I kind of look at like Andy Kaufman or Phil Hendry or one of those kind of people on my account, and like just that it's like, it's fake, but people, they enjoy like the satire of life, and I think that's where I get my following. I mean, no, it has crossed over into politics, like we talked about.
Yeah.
I
so
try
what
not to make that
percentage of
negative.
you have an account that is actually labeled parody,
Yes.
but many famous people from Christina Amanpour to Rosie O'Donnell and William Shatner have engaged with you, not clocking indeed that it's a parody account.
They didn't know. They probably know. Yeah.
And you think they did know? Or
I know.
I'm
pretty sure Rosie didn't know. She was pretty mad at me at the time. Yeah.
And Justin, you kind of came into this business thinking that it's kind of funny, and you know that there are people who are in on the joke and were enjoying it for its entertainment value. But like, what percentage of the people do you think that have come across both of you, your content, understood that it was fake?
Understood that it was fake from the get-go?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, it depends on where people land. On National Report, there are lots of stories on there that are, it's really an entertainment site, right? And so it kind of goes across the whole spectrum of satire, fake news, entertainment, hoaxes, whatever it is. So, I mean, that's a good question. I don't really know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Do you have a feel for it?
Like I know I had seen your site with the Ted Cruz and the Sarah Palin. I know I had seen your site before at some point in the past.
Because you both hadn't met until, we didn't actually clarify that. You hadn't met until last night.
No.
Correct.
Okay.
But we were just, I know I had seen a site in the past, but I didn't, buy into it or anything. I don't think, I mean, for my account, like if I'm arguing with somebody and they just see the argument, it just labels it. But I'm not verified like basically every other politician is, and most of the journalists and other people. But it's usually when somebody has an emotional reaction, like that's probably more likely when they're going to like fall into the think Rep. Smith is real, or sometimes there's people that are just kind of, I've had a lot of people, once they knew that I was not real for sure, they still wanted to argue with me, and they still wanted to debate with me. And I think that's because they just like someone paying attention to them that has, like just with that label. I mean, they just appreciate the idea that they're able to interact with a politician because everyone else ignores them.
Okay, let me ask a follow-on question. Do you think that people today are more or less critical thinking than they were, say, 5 years ago?
That depends on the definition. I mean, we have more information than, one of the great things is that we have more access to information than we've ever had. So if I don't want to believe something that I read in the New York Times, or the New York Times, let's say, writes a negative article, and I'm included in it just by, completely ridiculously, and it's disproven 2 days later by the New York Times itself, that it was like it's good to have access to all of that information. Like I can just look it up. I don't have to buy all the papers. I don't have to, you know. I mean, it's like we have infinite resources. But back, I mean, if we think like, oh, it's more dangerous now because people like you and I are like, we're doing fake news and parody accounts and stuff like that. I mean, it's like Andy Kaufman existed back in the 70s, had a show where he was the intergender wrestling champion, you know, and people thought that was real. And then there was the Weekly World News with Bill Clinton meeting aliens, like in every single grocery store. I mean, like this stuff has always been around, this sort of jokey type of entertainment type stuff. And then it's always like, you wonder how far does it go? I didn't really intend for it to be what it became, I guess. So it's kind of hard to answer that. But as far as informed, I mean, I don't know. It's a tough answer because sometimes I feel like people are not informed at all, and like, how could you not know this? Like that's what I'm thinking. Like just
Right.
about a story. And then there's other times when people know an amazing amount. I mean, the woman who cut my hair the other day. I mean, she knew like everything. I mean, she was telling me stuff that I'm just sitting there like, wow. I mean, amazed.
Justin, where do you come out on that question?
I don't know that it's changed much in the past 5 years. I agree with Jeffrey that, you know, this sort of information has been around for a long time, tabloids and disinformation and so
Okay,
forth.
so I guess, you know, I think that, you know, in today's age, there's no single person or organization that, you know, holds the mic. And you both have a pretty unique experience of like building and speaking into this megaphone that's reaching a really large audience. And I want you to give us some advice because we're mostly people from the technology world, and we care about disinformation. Let's go through a couple of things because we've only got a few minutes. Facts. My impression from speaking to you both is that we do think that there is such a thing as true, cold, hard facts that we think are important to protect and surface. So my takeaway as a techie is let's design an internet that supports the work of fact-checking. What would your advice be?
Personally, I don't believe that and you're not going to like to hear this, I don't know that the solution is through tech. You know, as far as information goes, I think restoring the trust in the actual traditional media sources is very important. News literacy programs are definitely important. I don't see people installing Google plugins or extensions and then having them tell you what's fake or what's real. You know, as we spoke about before, the people who need those tools are the ones that think that other people need tools. We all would probably need those tools. I think we all go into stories with our own biases, whichever side you're on. And so I don't know that tech I think that it can help in slowing the spread of misinformation, but then you kind of also get into the discussion about limiting free speech and who's actually the editor, what kind of credibility does the person who's doing that limiting have? How transparent are they in the methods that they're using to limit that speech? So I think it's a sticky area for you know, for companies like Google and companies like Facebook. I don't know where the responsibility lies, but I think that ultimately individual consumers of content need to be more aware of what they're doing online. I find it amazing that, you know, we're this far now into the internet, the digital age, I guess, and people still believe what they read online. It's insane.
Okay.
Yeah, mine would be probably almost the opposite. I think that some of the most dangerous fake news that we've ever had, including the cause of the Iraq War, came from fake news that was just like pronouncements from the government that were accepted uncritically by the mainstream media, you know, accepted by the entire New York Times editorial board. Something must be done. There are WMDs in Iraq, which turns out not to be true. You know, and these have like, I mean, murderous consequences. Like thousands and thousands and thousands of people die. So now to come along and say like a couple of websites like my account or your account or like something like to InfoWars is one I've heard a bunch of times, like that there's just this danger that emerged and it's going to sway things the wrong way. Well, we've had the danger for a long time. In my opinion, I think the danger is the mainstream media having too much credibility sometimes.
Okay.
Now I think it would be nice if there was a way if facts themselves instead of opinions could be distinguished better, like through we were talking about this, like commentariats kind of like spins things, and like if there were like more like raw fact sites where it's like, here is how the unemployment rate is calculated. Here is how this person described it. You know, like something that was more, like so people can really get the raw information but then understand what it means, but it's complex. And a lot of it comes down to credibility, and that's the problem. It's like, I just don't think it's fair to give credibility to people who have clearly not earned it in the past.
Okay, I think complexity is probably a really good place to close now, because we're out of time. We started a conversation that needs to happen if we are going to, as technologists play a role in addressing the problem of disinformation. We need to make sure that we understand it, and we can't understand it unless we have conversations like this one. So thank you very much for being part of it. Thank you for coming up and sharing your perspectives with us. And thank you to you all for joining us.
Thank you.